Before the birth of photography in 1829, no human being in history had ever been captured or recorded in a truly lifelike manner. For centuries, impressions of people only existed in oil paintings on canvas and could only ever be preserved through art or memory. Even though thousands of stunningly realistic paintings have captured the essence of so many fascinating figures throughout history, only photography has the capacity to truly capture that unique and fleeting moment. That perfect glimpse of the real person stood motionless but truly present before the photographer's lens. A true reflection of humanity, a mirror of truth that looks straight back at us and says, "I was here. I existed. Remember me." Welcome to Animata Historia, breathing life into historic photographs from around the world to remind us of how we used to live, where we came from, and what made us who we are today. In this episode, we are reanimating vintage daguerreotypes of the first humans in history to be photographed. In 1829, a French artist and designer named Louis Daguerre struck a partnership with fellow inventor Joseph Niepce to develop a method to permanently capture the fleeting images visible in a camera obscura. Niepce passed away suddenly in 1833, but Daguerre kept experimenting, finally achieving success around 1834. The existence of the process was first announced to the public in January of 1839, followed by an extraordinary move by the French government that would fuel the rapid growth of photography worldwide. Recognizing the enormous potential of this invention, the French government made a deal with Daguerre, acquiring the rights to the process in exchange for lifetime pensions for both Daguerre and Niepce's son. Then the government gave it all away. On August 19, 1839, the details of the new daguerreotype process were presented to the public as a gift to the world from France. For the first time, ordinary people saw their own faces reflected with startling clarity, as if time itself had been stilled in silver. The earliest reliably dated photograph of a human being was inadvertently taken by Daguerre one spring morning in 1838 from the window of the diorama where he lived and worked. Though it shows the busy Boulevard du Temple in Paris, the long exposure time of about 10 or 12 minutes meant that moving traffic could not be seen. However, the bootblack and his customer in lower left corner remained still long enough to be distinctly visible. However, 1 year earlier in 1837, this image, if verified, would be the oldest surviving portrait photograph of a person ever taken. It is believed to be a portrait of Jean-Baptiste, known as Constant Huet, a Parisian engraver born in 1796, who worked at the Natural History Museum where Daguerre took pictures in 1837. Others believe the title of oldest known photographic portrait of a human belongs to American photography pioneer Robert Cornelius. He took this photo himself outside his family's lamp-making store on 8th Street in Philadelphia in 1839, making it indisputably the first selfie ever taken. Hannah Gorby, born Hannah Stilley, is believed to have been born around 1746. This photograph of her in her last year of life at the age of 94 was taken around 1840, which makes her the earliest born person ever photographed. She was born before the end of the Baroque period, during an era when waves of settlers flooded the New World, specifically the Americas, in hopes of re-establishing life away from European control. Born in 1749, Conrad Heyer holds the distinction of being the only American Revolutionary War veteran to be photographed who served with George Washington. In December 1776, Heyer crossed the Delaware River along with General Washington. This photo was taken in 1852, making him 103 years old at the time. He died 4 years later. In 1840, atop the rooftop of what would become New York University, John Draper set out to create a photographic portrait of his sister, Dorothy. Her portrait holds a significant place in American history as the first photographic portrait in the United States. It captured more than just her likeness. It encapsulated a moment of technological and cultural transformation. The process was challenging. Dorothy had to sit unblinking for a 65-second exposure. To enhance the contrast of the image, Draper dusted her face with white flour. The result was a remarkably natural portrait, capturing the essence of Dorothy's character. In the 1840s, French scholar and artist Joseph Giraud d'Étranger set out with a camera, not to capture portraits, but the world itself. He traveled across the Mediterranean, creating hundreds of daguerreotypes. In a softly lit studio in Rome around 1842, he captured a quiet grace in silver and light. A young woman clasps a delicate flower, a bloom borrowed from nature. Her identity remains unknown, yet in her stillness, she embodies both fragility and strength. The following pictures are some of the earliest known portrait photographs to ever have been taken. Many of these people were born in the 1700s, and some of them even lived through the American Revolutionary War. The majority of subjects in the photos are older and no doubt wealthy, as photography was expensive and only accessible to those in a good financial position. This first selection of images were archived without any accompanying documentation, making it impossible to identify either the subjects or the photographer. But these pictures are much more than just portraits of people that once lived. They are the first humans in history to be photographed. They represent a momentous and critical moment in the history of humankind, one that can neither be underestimated nor repeated. The people you see before you now all sat before the first cameras in history, frozen, statuesque, dressed in their finest clothes, each of them oblivious to the future impact of photography on the generations to come. Each daguerreotype is a remarkably detailed, one-of-a-kind photographic image on a highly polished, silver-plated sheet of copper. The image does not sit on the surface of the metal, but appears to be floating in space with the illusion of reality, especially with examples that are sharp and well exposed. Exposed in a camera obscura and developed in mercury vapors, each highly polished silvered copper plate is a unique photograph that, when viewed in proper light, exhibits extraordinary detail and three-dimensionality. Although it first emerged in Europe, the daguerreotype captured its greatest fame in the United States, nowhere more so than in New York City. By the late 1850s, the city teemed with hundreds of daguerreotypists competing for patrons, turning portraiture into both profession and art form. The most accomplished established grand studios on the upper floors of buildings along and near Broadway, elegant spaces that echoed in other major cities, from Boston to Philadelphia and across the continent to San Francisco, where the silvered image became a defining mirror of American life. Men and women, once destined to fade like whispers, now gazed back across centuries with unblinking eyes. The world, stunned, saw itself reflected not in oil paint or marble, but in truth, wrinkles, scars, and imperfections preserved with aching fidelity. What had belonged only to poets and painters was suddenly given to everyone. The ability to remember faces exactly as they were, to defy death's erasure. And so the daguerreotype spread like wildfire across Parisian boulevards into American parlors, through the hands of wanderers and dreamers. Families gathered to witness their own image held in a case of velvet and glass, as miraculous as if the soul itself had been trapped in metal. Its impact was seismic. Memory became visible, history became personal. The anonymous lives of millions began to resist vanishing. Portraits of abolitionists, presidents, immigrants, and soldiers became silent witnesses, whispering their truths into the present. For all of us sat here today, in the increasingly technological 21st century, it can be extremely challenging to reflect honestly and objectively on a past that was captured in black and white alone. The apparent seriousness of these portraits, with their ghostly monochromatic appearance, can seem almost foreign to us, as if these people were different from us somehow. The rigidity and lifelessness of these images creates a seemingly insurmountable distance between them and us. Until now, that is. AI technology, even in its infancy, with all its flaws and inaccuracies, still allows us to reanimate our once static history and bring life and character to the first photographic subjects ever recorded. The following daguerreotypes were the first to capture the famous and important men of that era in something other than paint. From writers, lawyers, businessmen, and clergymen to statesmen, politicians, orators, and presidents. The camera was the new artist in town, and the influential members of society were the subjects. Like Edgar Allan Poe, the American writer who gave the world The Raven and the Telltale Heart. While Poe shaped modern horror and detective fiction, his troubled life and haunting imagination left a literary legacy of beauty within darkness. Or the Swiss-born Edward Troy, who became America's great painter of racehorses, immortalizing champions like Lexington with a vividness that made sport into art. He was raised in a time before photography, when art was the only way to imitate life. A master orator and brilliant lawyer from Massachusetts, Rufus Choate turned words into weapons. His eloquence swayed juries and dazzled the Senate, earning him fame as one of the greatest advocates of his age. Adolf Friedrich Vollmer, a German painter of the 19th century, became known for his landscapes and seascapes where everyday life met natural beauty. His works captured a changing Europe at the edge of industrialization. A Europe where men like Cornelius Vanderbilt could thrive. Called the Commodore, he built an empire of steamboats and railroads. Rising from modest beginnings, he became one of the wealthiest men of his age, symbolizing both opportunity and the inequalities of America's Gilded Age. Whilst the American lawyer, soldier, and politician Alexander William Donovan commanded troops in the Mexican-American War and defended the rights of religious minorities, he embodied frontier pragmatism and principled leadership. A congregational minister and theologian of New England, Edwards Amasa Park shaped generations of students at Andover Theological Seminary. His blend of faith and intellect placed him at the heart of America's 19th century religious thought. Daniel Webster was one of the greatest American orators and statesmen of his time, and served as a senator and Secretary of State. His speeches defended the Union and the Constitution during the nation's most divisive years. A Maine politician and public servant, Ezra French represented his state in Congress during the mid-19th century. Though less remembered than others of his era, his career reflected the steady work of governance in a young republic. An Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court from 1811 to 1845, Story wrote influential opinions that shaped constitutional law. His commentaries on the Constitution remained foundational in American legal thought. This daguerreotype of Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, dates from 1842 and is the oldest known photograph of a member of the British royal family. He was only 23 years old when this photo was taken. Prince Albert and Queen Victoria played a surprisingly important role in the early history of photography. Both were fascinated by the new invention, which emerged during their reign, and they quickly became its enthusiastic patrons. Prince Albert, with his keen interest in science and modern technology, saw photography as both an art and a tool for documenting history. He collected photographs, supported pioneering photographers, and encouraged the use of the medium for education and record-keeping. When Chopin visited London in 1848, he performed at a number of private concerts, including for Queen Victoria and Prince Albert at Stafford House. This rare picture of Frédéric Chopin is one of only 2 photos ever taken of one of the world's greatest composers. It was taken in 1849 by Louis-Auguste Bisson, a few months before he died of what doctors thought was tuberculosis. Chopin was 39 years old at the time of his death. The first ever photograph of a United States president was actually taken of William Henry Harrison in 1841, but has since been lost to history. This image of John Quincy Adams, the sixth president in office, now stands as the oldest surviving photo of an American president. The arrival of the daguerreotype meant that, from now on, every royal, head of state, or historical figure of stature or importance was to be remembered and recorded in photographic print, not paint. The birth of photography signaled an immense shift in the importance of art portraiture in capturing the likeness of the world's most prominent leaders and rulers. Now, for the first time in human history, we could record exactly what we see with the naked eye and preserve it for future posterity. Like this early picture of Abraham Lincoln taken 15 years before his presidency. Or this rare image of Lincoln with messy hair. Hessler, the photographer, insisted on smoothing down Lincoln's hair, but Lincoln didn't like the result and ran his fingers through it before the shot was taken. There's not a chance that we would have ever seen such a candid depiction of such an influential historical figure as this if it was painted by an artist. Arthur Wellesley, the first Duke of Wellington, famed for defeating Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, was also among the first great leaders photographed. 3 decades after that historic victory, his portrait captured the shift from painted heroes to history preserved through light. William Gladstone, one of Britain's most influential prime ministers, served 4 separate terms in the 19th century. Known as the Grand Old Man, he championed reform, expanding the vote and modernizing politics. A fierce orator and moralist, Gladstone left a legacy of leadership that shaped Victorian Britain. In 1842, French writer Honoré de Balzac, one of the defining figures of French literature in the 19th century, sat for one of the earliest photographs. The restless author of La Comédie Humaine was already capturing the passions and flaws of 19th century society, shaping the birth of modern realism. Michael Faraday, captured here by the new science of photography, became one of the greatest scientific minds of the 19th century. His discoveries in electricity and magnetism laid the foundation for modern technology, earning him the title, the father of electromagnetism. While he was alive, Richard Wagner was the single most popular composer in Germany. Even today, Wagner is one of the most celebrated composers in all of Western music history. Jacob Venedig, a German journalist and politician, seen here in 1848, gave voice to the fight for freedom and democracy. A radical thinker, he stood at the heart of Europe's revolutionary wave, challenging kings with the power of words. This haunting 1849 daguerreotype captures John C. Calhoun, the American statesman whose fierce stare reflected a lifetime of political battles. A powerful orator and controversial figure, Calhoun shaped the debates that defined a nation on the edge of civil war. Today, when we take a photograph with the flick of a finger, we inherit that first astonishment. The ghostly faces of the 1840s remind us, photography is more than art or record, it is communion across time. Those first sitters could not know they were staring into our future. Yet here we are, staring back, bound together in light. In their steady gazes, we find both fragility and triumph. They remind us that every life, however fleeting, deserves remembrance. And so the daguerreotype lives on, not just in museums or archives, but in every photograph we take, each one a quiet defiance of forgetting. Without photography, our ability to faithfully capture memories would disappear like dust in the air. Everything we ever did, everyone we ever loved, would slowly fade away into the mists of time, until all that remains is the sense and feeling of what once was. Photographs are the guardians of memory. They stand firm and steadfast against the strong winds of change and reproduce without prejudice or alteration those fleeting moments we felt compelled to record. These were the first humans to be photographed, and their legacy is to remind us all of the fragility of life, to live each moment as if it's our last, with joy, with gratitude, and with love in our hearts.